Hello. It's great to get together again to have church with each other, even though we can't see one another face to face. It's good to connect this way. This is a great picture. It's a picture of a wave breaking on a shore, and the water is full of little tiny creatures. They, as soon as you shake them or move them in any way, they splash out with light. Scientists call it bioluminescence. And the sea is full of them in certain tropical places, and anytime you move the water, it's all full of sparkly light. For a while, when we lived in the Philippines, we'd have holidays down on this boat, and it was quite high from the top of it down to the water. And sometimes our kids would go night swimming, and it was deep in the water where we were and very dark. And sometimes, when conditions were right, the sea was full of these little bioluminescent animals. So I've stood on the top deck and watched them dive in deep down under the water, and they looked like they were 20-foot long creatures. All the perimeter of their body was glowing with light. They looked like great aliens swimming around. Another time I put on goggles and went deep down in the water, and John bomb dived from right up high, and I watched him under the water. He's in a 30-foot column of bubbles and light. Just amazing thing to see, just beautiful in the darkness, this bioluminescent light. And I'd like it if you could hold in your minds the idea of light as we move into this message. It's a part of the Treasure in Clay series that comes from 2 Corinthians chapter 4. You might remember we already did a first one called Quitters and Liars and a second one called A Veiled Threat. And this is the third in that series, and it's called Lifelight. We're looking still at the passage from 2 Corinthians chapter 4 and just the first 10 verses, and we've already looked at verses 1 to 5. So this message is about verse 6. We're going to read the passage again to remind ourselves. This is what the scriptures say, 2 Corinthians chapter 4 and the first 10 verses. Therefore, since through God's mercy we have this ministry, we do not lose heart. Rather, we have renounced secret and shameful ways. We don't use deception, nor do we distort the word of God. On the contrary, by setting forth the truth plainly, we commend ourselves to everyone's conscience in the sight of God. And even if our gospel is veiled, it's veiled to those who are perishing. The God of this age has blinded the minds of unbelievers so that they cannot see the light of the gospel of the glory of Christ, who is the image of God. For what we preach is not ourselves, but Jesus Christ as Lord, and ourselves as your servants for Jesus' sake. And this is the 6th verse. For God, who said, "Let light shine out of darkness," made his light shine in our hearts to give us the light of the knowledge of the glory of God in the face of Christ. But we have this treasure in jars of clay to show that this all-surpassing power is from God and not from us. We are hard pressed on every side, but not crushed, perplexed, but not in despair, persecuted, but not abandoned, struck down, but not destroyed. We always carry around in our body the death of Jesus, so that the life of Jesus may also be revealed in our body. And that's the 10 verses that we're going to look at. Today, it's just verse 6. And verse 6 is a great reminder that this letter was written by Paul, and the pivotal experience of his life happened on the Damascus Road, and it's all started for him with a great light, a light that knocked him down off his horse. And in this verse, Paul is linking the light of creation, when God made the world, with the light of salvation, the light of the gospel, the moment when all of humanity and the whole universe was born, with the moment in each person's life experience when they can become born again. He's talking here about Genesis light. God said, "Let there be light." And when he made that command, the laws of physics and the universe and all created matter conformed to that command in incredible and beautiful ways. And it's good to just remind ourselves of the extraordinary truth of light in our world. What's it like? All the times that you've seen light as a beautiful thing. The light of sunrise, first filtering down to us through the trees, or the light of sunset, different but beautiful again. The light of the moon, how soft and silvery it is. One of my favourite quotes when I was young says, "What would a man not pay to look at a full moon rise, had not God so importunately made it free?" An extraordinary thing to watch a full moon rise and to see its light out on the world. And twilight, photographers talk about the golden hour, that moment between daylight and sunset when the sunlight is all filtered through the Earth's atmosphere and everything is lit up with gold. There's this warm, lovely natural light. It's just beautiful. It's great for taking photos, I'm told, too. And the light of stars, different again. I read years ago that the reason stars twinkle is because we see them through the Earth's atmosphere and all the space, all that exists in space between us and them, meteorites and other atmospheric disturbances and stuff, and it gives these beautiful lights the impression of twinkling, this unique quality that starlight has. How lovely to lie on your back and look up at a sky full of stars. And some great telescopes see them, and we see great clouds and swirling colours and shapes in them. It seems that light is full of colour. The light of a sunset can be just filled with pinks and purples, and sometimes it's all molten gold behind the clouds. Just amazing. And perhaps loveliest of all is when the sky is filled with a rainbow. All the colours of existence in a ribbon across the heavens. Just beautiful. Sometimes there's lightning. It's like God turns on a great beam behind clouds. There's sheets of lightning that move from one cloud to another. Sometimes it streaks down out of the heavens in great finger-like forks that touch the earth. Amazingly powerful light. There's light in little tiny creatures that fly among us, little fireflies who carry in their bodies light in gardens and in certain climates they live in. Right down in the darkest depths of the sea, there are creatures who carry light in their bodies as part of their lifestyle. Light reflected on calm water, the beauty of light on the sea. A photographer called Vitor Schietti, I don't know how to say his name properly, but he takes these photographs of trees by making a long exposure. He discovers, he said, that light seems to drip from trees. Light streams from trees in a range beyond what our human eyes can see, and the camera captured it. The photos are amazing to look at. It's like all trees stream light out of them, energy. There's a book by Anthony Drewer called All the Light We Cannot See. And it sometimes seems, looking at mysterious images of light, that the earth is full of light, that there's light all around us and sometimes we can't even see it. Then we catch glimpses of the mysterious beauty of light, like the aurora borealis, great beams of light, huge swirls of light up in the sky. An extraordinary thing, beautiful, life-giving, unfailing, illuminating, warming, burning, both in the farthest reaches of the universe and right close to us all. The world seems to be full of light. If you go into many fields of study, beauty, art, physics, astronomy, photography, most of the sciences, at some stage in there you will be studying light. It seems an important part of human knowledge. And Paul here is talking about original light, the beginnings of all light. The verse that we have says, "For God who said, 'Let there be light,' in that moment of creation, God said, 'Let there be light,' also made his light shine in our hearts." It's such a terrific connection he makes between the created light at the beginning of the world and God shining his light in our hearts. There's so much overlap. There's so much shared material between these two things. It's a terrific parallel to make. Created light, for example, is the start of all of the energy cycles of life on Earth. When my kids were little, they had a game called Sim Safari, and the aim of the game was to build a really successful safari park that had all the biggest, most extraordinary animals, rhinoceroses and elephants and lions and tigers and bears and buffalo and giraffes and all those sort of animals. And you had to start with this blank slate and a very small budget, and these animals were expensive. So the kids played for hours trying to build this successful park. And I made a discovery in the game. when I played it, that if you go in there and you just start with bees and bugs and mosquitoes, if you just put some water in and start with those things, which are free, you don't even pay for them, they're just part of it, but you build them in and you get more and more and more of those. In time, the game will put in frogs to start eating those, and then in time it'll put in grasshoppers, and in time it will put in herons and ibis and birds to eat the frogs and the grasshoppers, and then will come, bigger animals that prey on the birds, and in time your whole park will be populated with all the animals you need. I know it's just a game, but it's also a true reflection of how the cycle of energy and life on Earth works. All of life begins, the cycle of energy begins with creatures who can turn sunlight into energy. That's where it all starts. The created life that God made is the beginning of the circle of energy and life. The created life is miraculous. It comes because God says a word, and light was made ex nihilo, or out of nothing. God didn't get a few things and mix them together and make like life in the same way that we make a cake. Out of nothing, he speaks this word. In the Narnia series, there's this lion, Aslan, who walks around on a barren earth roaring and making light begin. It's an extraordinary, miraculous, divine thing that God did when he said, "Let there be light." He spoke this great word. The other thing that the Genesis account tells us is that light dispelled darkness. The Authorized Version says, "In the beginning, the world was formless and void." It's an attempt to translate a Hebrew word, tohu abohu. I don't know how you say it, but the word means there was chaos and darkness. Nothing made sense. Everything was disordered, and God speaks and he begins to bring order into the chaos and the darkness. And the first element that he brings into it is light. Light dispels darkness and chaos and brings order. And light is too much for our eyes. You can't look into the sun without damaging your eyes. You can't even stay in it for too long without burning your skin. It's too much for us. It's bigger than us. It's beyond us. And the created light is a source of incredible beauty and variety. It exists in the world around us, the world that brims with life and light in incredible variety and beauty. And in the same way that those things are true of the created light, it's true of the gospel that God brings into our life. It's the start of all spiritual life. Everybody's spiritual life begins with the word. The Psalm 119 says, "The entrance of your word brings light." It's miraculous, divine word. It's not an accident that Jesus is called the Word. John says, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God." And he came down to us as a man. It's no mistake that he's called the Word, this miraculous Jesus who comes in the same way as God created light in the universe. Jesus creates the gospel of life and light in the lives of individual people. And it's miraculous. You can't explain it. It's an extraordinary thing. And it's the beginning of all spiritual life. It dispels darkness and chaos in the lives of people who accept the truth of the gospel. Suddenly the mess that we made, the meaningless jumble of tohu abohu, starts the long process of coming into order when God comes into our lives. It's too much for us to look at. The Hebrew talks about the Shekinah glory of God, the glory that was so extraordinary a human person couldn't look upon it. It was more than we could see. And it too is a source of incredible beauty and variety. If we were meeting together today, I'd say, look around you. Look around you at the variety of people who've accepted the gospel, for whom spiritual life has begun. But perhaps you can look around on the internet or think of all those people all over the world, of every race and nationality and language group in every country. There are people who love Jesus, for whom the divine word has come and spiritual life has begun. Incredible beauty and variety. The book of Isaiah talks about us being given a son, a child. a child of life. It says just a little later in that passage, the people walking in darkness have seen a great light. On those living in the land of the shadow of death, a light has dawned. C.S. Lewis writes an account of being in his garden shed, just a dark little shed where he kept the mower and tools, I guess. And he went in there one day, and with the door shut behind him, it was quite dark, you couldn't see much. But there was a gap between some of the door boards and the frame of the doorway, and through that gap came a beam of sunlight. And he looked at it, and you could see little motes dancing in it, and tiny particles drifting through the light, and you could see this beam of light coming into the dark shed. And then he took a step sideways and stood in the beam and looked out. And in that moment, everything changed, because suddenly he couldn't see the shed around him at all, but through that little gap, he could see a bright day. He could see trees moving and maybe birds flitting by, and 90 million miles away beyond that, the light of the sun itself came to him. From all that distance, you could see light and life. And it's that sort of an experience where you suddenly see everything differently that the gospel is talking about, that Paul is writing about in this letter to the Corinthians, because that was Paul's experience. The light that came upon him with great force knocked him off his horse and made him blind, but in that moment he saw a truth revealed, a truth that perhaps he wouldn't have seen without so strong a confrontation with it. And the truth that he saw was shocking to him, shocked him to the heart of his careful rabbinical training for all those years, his zealous pursuit of Christian people, because he saw the light of the knowledge of the glory of God in the face of Jesus. Shocking. A really difficult truth for him to grasp. The unseeable, unfakeable Shekinah glory, the light that told you that God was present, the light that no one could imitate, the light that no one could actually even look upon without damaging themselves, that to see it was to die. It was that light that he saw, and he asked a question. The voice said to him, "Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me?" And he said, "Who are you, Lord?" And the question came, the answer came, "I am Jesus. I am the great name of God, the great I am, Jesus." God and Jesus are the same being. I am Jesus, the light of the Shekinah glory in the face of Jesus. This was the truth that Saul saw on that road. And he became Paul. He became a different person. And the question that he got an answer to then is still the central question facing humanity. Who is Jesus? Who is he really? Can you trust what he says? Can his gospel come into your life and change it? I was talking to someone just this week who said they'd tried lots of different religions, and as they looked at them all, they moved away from Christianity because other faith systems had made less damage in people's lives, less damage in the world. And so he picked something else. And he's talking there about the abuse of children, which has become such an issue in churches. He's talking there about secret and shameful things, about moments when human people have distorted and manipulated the word of God for their own ends, whatever they might be. When people have messed with the scriptures and have messed with the truth they were telling because of their own agenda, because of something they wanted to do. And I understand his wanting to distance himself from those lies and distortions. But this remains true. It's irrelevant whether you like or dislike the way human people have lived out the gospel. And we want to acknowledge that people have made horrible failures in that area. But whether you like it or not is pretty irrelevant if it's true. If the thing that knocked Paul off his horse is true, if this is the light of the knowledge of the glory of God in the face of Jesus, if Jesus really is God, then whether people have done a good job or a bad job of reflecting that glory, of living it out, of being Christian people, of representing him on earth, whether they've done a good job or a bad job of it, it behoves us to search for what's true. not what we prefer. The entrance of your word gives light. In the light of the scriptures, you can see your own self and the whole world differently, more clearly, more accurately. But perhaps the loveliest words on this topic are recorded in the book of John chapter 8, and it's Jesus himself who said, "I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life." Isn't that lovely? And it takes us full circle back to that idea of bioluminescence, those living things, teeny tiny ones, millions of them in the water, and whenever the water moves, that's what happens. They sparkle with light. Whatever waves wash over them, they throw out light. Whatever bumps them or knocks them, they just reflect this wonderful light in them. It's such a great metaphor for what we ought to be as Christian people, that no matter what circumstances or what other people or what challenges or difficulties bump us and tumble us over like waves, what shines out of us is the light of the knowledge of the glory of God in the face of Jesus. Bioluminescence. It's a great word. There's two parts to it. The first part is the word bio, which is the Latin for life. It's in our word biology, the study of living things. Bio and luminescence means light. Life, light. It's a great word and a great idea and a great image to carry with us in the weeks to come. Whatever happens, however life tumbles us around, whether what washes over us is beautiful and easy or difficult and challenging and discouraging, we have within us the light of the knowledge of the glory of God in the face of Jesus.